Recording. Hi, everybody. I'm the education manager at Rethos. I'm also here. I'm learning the position from Sumaya. So if you have any questions, you can also directly message me.
All right. We can get started.
I shared my screen and then I immediately forgot that I need to advance the slides.
No, that's all right.
That's
That's quite all right. I was going to just introduce ourselves. I don't think people are on, but Natalie is having a little bit of a technical something with her screen, so she may or may not be on the actual screen, but I think we're just small little heads anyway when you're looking at the slides, so it's okay. All right, a little bit of background just quickly on this workshop is, oh gosh, over a year and a half ago, Natalie and I had connected when she was still at Rethos, and I had shared an idea that had come through my brain a while ago when I was working at the city of St. Louis Park. And that was the fact that those of you who are in the real estate world, helping folks buy and sell homes, intersect with people at very interesting parts of their lives, times when they are really, there's a lot going on, both emotionally, financially, big influx of getting things and getting rid of things. And that a lot of you have a great opportunity to help your clients think about incorporating reuse, waste prevention into their work. And this had come up when I was with the city trying to help folks that are buying new homes and such. And so I had suggested this, given that Rethos has a lot of experience working with real estate folks and doing classes. And so this workshop came out of that. And I believe this is class number 3 that we have done of this. So thank you for joining us. And I'm excited to be here representing Reuse Minnesota. I'm the executive director, and we are a member-based nonprofit that works to support the reuse sector throughout Minnesota. The way that I sort of briefly explain it is we're kind of like a chamber of commerce for the reuse sector, but we also do education, advocacy work. So some stuff on policy, things around educating high school students and other young folks who might want to get into reuse. So really trying to get that as a mainstream part of our culture. And so that is our background and how I come to the table.
We already have given a little bit of context to Rethos. As Emily mentioned, I'm Natalie Heneghan, and I used to be the education manager at Rethos. I was in that role when she and I collaborated on creating this class. I have since moved down to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I'm the community outreach director at Habitat for Humanity. So I'm actually excited to offer sort of a new perspective on reuse and home repair in my new role here. And yes, like Emily also mentioned, I'm having some strange video things happening, so you can't see my face today. But the little thumbnail photo I realized of myself is from a historic building in St. Paul. If you can name it, that would be awesome. I don't have a prize for you, but I'll tell you at the end. Okay. Oh yes, and we wanted to be sure that everybody knew. So we're going to be referencing quite a few businesses and resources, organizations in the Twin Cities, and it does not constitute a recommendation or endorsement by either Rethos or Reuse Minnesota. So we encourage you to check your references, interview or research prospective service providers, and all of that good stuff to make sure you or your clients are making the right choices for your projects. Emily, go ahead.
All right, how we're going to do this is a little bit of a yo-yo. I'm going to start us off setting the stage for what reuse is, why that matters. Natalie's going to go into a bunch of resources around deconstruction, and then I'll come back and share some stuff around furnishing and help with move outs. So what is reuse? If you want to go to the next slide, the thing I always like to start off with is that reuse is different than what a lot of us think about when we think of waste prevention and reducing the stuff that goes in the trash. And the diagram you see on the screen today is one that is very much government wonky world. It's called the waste management hierarchy in a lot of places. I call it the materials management hierarchy because I don't like to automatically default to thinking of all these amazing resources as waste. And so I put this up here because it's just a helpful way. We often see the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, put together in the nice little triangle of arrows, and they sort of are presented as if they're equal in value from an environmental perspective or from whatever perspective. But the reality is, when we talk about environmental benefit, that reduce and reuse are the most important parts. They have the potential, because of the way that the life cycle and the impact of products works, where you have the majority of the materials are upstream, taking energy, taking resources, that prevention and reducing the amount of material we use in the first place and then reusing what we already have has a much greater impact from an environmental perspective than recycling. So to be clear, while it may be obvious to folks, reuse is not landfilling, waste to energy, recycling, and composting. For those of you who live in the Twin Cities Metro, if you live in Hennepin County or Ramsey, Washington County, the majority of your trash is not landfilled, it's actually incinerated. So if you've ever gone to a Twins game, there's a building next door called the Herc. That's where Hennepin County trash is incinerated to make energy. Ramsey, Washington, turn it into a fuel, and then it goes elsewhere in the state to be burned as a fuel. So those things are obviously not reuse. But as I mentioned, sometimes things like recycling get conflated with reuse as if they're the same, or else people say, oh yeah, I reuse all the time. I recycle all my bottles and cans. And the point of this is to just say that reuse is fundamentally a different thing. And of course, composting is not reuse either. So reuse is using items and materials multiple times for their original purpose or repurposing to a new use. Now, of course, if you have a reusable water bottle, that's an easy one. That's using the bottle over and over and over. When it comes to building materials, that might look pretty different. And Natalie will get into that a lot more. But in our world, reuse includes repair and refurbishment, which can sometimes be a form of waste prevention as well. So the reduce side, where you're maintaining something in order to prevent having to buy something new, you're keeping it in good use. Preservation, salvage materials, deconstruction, and buying used. So those are all the things that we think of as reuse when we have this conversation. All right, so this diagram here is just a way to think about sort of the typical way that we, I guess for those of you who are visual learners, this is a way to take what I've just said and put it into a diagram. A lot of our systems right now are built very linear, where we have use and disposal. So there's not a lot of stuff done in them. You might have something that is used for a long time, but a lot of things are not designed to last super long, unfortunately, including in the world of building materials and in our everyday products. So that's a very straight line. Recycling, you may have a couple other cycles, especially for things like paper or glass, they can be recycled a little more, but ultimately there is a lot of disposal. And circular really tries to keep things out as long as possible. Now, of course, there are going to be some things that may end up being disposed or have to be disposed, but the goal is to really keep them circulating for as long as possible in our use and to avoid that disposal altogether. All right, so on the impacts and benefits, and this comes from a variety of different sources, but we know that there's a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions from building material and home good reuse. So it really varies from sector to sector. Certain things like reuse of wood has a very high reduction of that impact because of all the carbon that is in our trees and in wood. So that's a huge value from reuse on that side. Economic side, so Reuse Minnesota has conducted a couple of impact studies, and we know that the reuse economy as a whole, so not just building materials and such, but generates about 45,000 jobs in Minnesota, which, you know, there's lots of jobs going on, obviously, but 45,000 is a lot of employment. So that might include working at thrift stores, but also deconstructing homes and all sorts of other ways that we reuse things. Repair is the largest sector of that, the largest chunk of that sector, just because it's really hard to outsource that work. And so these things really help grow the local economy, which for those of you who are in the real estate world, you know that your jobs are very local, right? Everything you do is right here. So it's great to be able to support your fellow folks in Minnesota, in the region, by growing those repair businesses, those resale businesses. So it really helps grow and support Minnesota here. Builds community. We find that a lot of people, especially if you've ever been to a Fix-It clinic, which we'll talk about later, those are great communities where people really enjoy getting to know each other and build lasting relationships, and provides value and opportunity for individuals. A number of entities that do things like deconstruction operate by helping folks who find barriers to employment, find employment, or who find meaningful work. And so they're able to get green jobs training. So it's environmentally beneficial, but also helps folks get back on their feet. All right, so the other thing about reuse specifically in Minnesota is that it aligns with larger state goals for reducing waste. There are a number of different processes that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and then all of the counties do to look at how we manage waste. And so there's been some pretty intentional processes over the last couple of years around building materials specifically. There was some stakeholder process in 2019, 2020, and then ongoing work that has come out from there. There's a quarterly meeting that actually happens. If anyone's really interested in this, let me know. A lot of its work, they try to incorporate it into these solid waste management plans. So looking at how do we look outside the garbage can and the recycling bin at all of what we call non-MSW. MSW is basically a mixed municipal solid waste, and essentially that's a fancy term for trash. And so how do we look outside? Because all of construction material goes to a different type of landfill. It doesn't go to your traditional trash landfills. So we've largely ignored that when we talk about overall policy around waste. Looking and working with cities to adopt ordinances to require things like waste plans, deconstruction. The city of St. Louis Park just adopted a policy that any projects that have certain amount of public funds that they need to do deconstruction. So that's something for you all to know if you have people looking to buy property in St. Louis Park or other communities as that becomes more common. And then the other side, of course, is bulky items, which isn't so much the homes themselves, but all the things we put in them, furniture, mattresses, and these can be really a challenge for disposal. So looking at ways to reuse more of these really has a great benefit. And my final slide for now is, if you are super into this kind of thing and you like more deep reports, you can check out the MPCA. They have a number of material composition studies, kind of what's going into the landfills, the stakeholder process I mentioned, and then the building materials focus group report. So if you're really interested in kind of the nitty gritty of that, you can check out those reports.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. So we're going to transition to talking about how we apply the value or ethic of reuse in our homes. So Emily set really important sort of groundwork for understanding the why behind reuse and the real impact of it here in Minnesota. And I'm going to focus in again on how we sort of apply this to various aspects of homeownership and utilizing our buildings. So I've broken it down into 3 subsections. First, we're going to talk about renovation and rehab. So of course, predicting that homeowners, in our communities are going to want to purchase their home and maybe make some changes to it, make it their own. How do we reuse? How do we encourage reuse of what already exists in our homes? And how do we capture a little something called embodied energy, which is a term I'm going to define on the next slide. And then we're looking to fill our home, right? So where can we look for salvaged furniture, hardware, lumber, all of the things that fill up our home, and ensuring we're not purchasing everything brand new, demanding the production of new products inside our homes. And then looking a little bit more long-term, our homes require ongoing maintenance and repair, and there are ways we can care for our homes that reduce waste and reduce the likelihood of big projects, big repair projects that would generate a lot of waste. So this is the one slide that's sort of nerdy technical. So this concept of embodied energy is really important when we're talking about reuse. Sometimes, zooming out a little bit, think about sustainability in our homes. A lot of times we focus in on operational energy, the energy that it takes to heat and cool our home, the energy it takes to keep the lights on. All of this stuff has to do with the operation of our home once we're already living in it. But embodied energy is all of the energy required to essentially get that home into operation. So it includes energy required to extract raw materials, lumber and metals and rubber, things like that, transporting raw materials to a manufacturer, then that at the manufacturer, putting all these raw materials into creating new products, transporting those products to a build site, and then actually putting it all together. So when we think about this and kind of zoom in all these individual processes, we see carbon emissions associated with all of these different activities have a huge impact, a huge environmental impact. It's harder to see sometimes because we get an energy bill every month that tells us exactly how much energy we used to heat and cool our home and to keep the lights on. We don't necessarily get an energy bill when you buy a house and it says this is how much it cost energy-wise to produce all of this stuff. But it's an important thing to think about, again, as we consider the options between purchasing something brand new to use in our home versus finding something that has been reused or salvaged. I included a fact here on the bottom. Data shows that it takes about 20 years of a typical building's 100-year operation to offset the energy expenditure of its construction. Put another way, sometimes you'll hear folks in the preservation world talk about how old buildings have already paid off their carbon debt. So essentially they've existed long enough and been used and reused enough to justify that upfront energy expenditure. To look at this in a slightly different way, here's a chart that shows, as it says, materials and energy used in constructing a medium-sized or 2,000 square foot home. So you can see here on the left, estimated amount of energy captured in biomass, energy from fossil fuels, what these are actually used for in creating the lumber and plywood and all the concrete and the steel and everything. And I want to turn your attention, though, to these pie charts on the bottom here that show fossil fuel energy by activity and by component. And one thing I find really, really interesting is that 96% of the fossil fuel energy used to construct this medium-sized home went to the manufacturing of the materials. So theoretically, we could say if we were to build this medium-sized home out of reclaimed, repurposed, reused materials, we would not have to manufacture anything and could reduce the fossil fuel energy usage almost by 100%. Obviously, that's super theoretical, but the vast majority of energy used is associated with the production, the creation of new products. And Emily and I are here today to tell you that there are loads of reused products whose embodied energy has already been utilized, and that we can keep reusing and not demand the generation, the construction, the manufacturing of new stuff. So now we've really hammered home, I think, why reuse is important. And when it comes to translating all of this to potential buyers and sellers, our homeowners in our community, we can offer them some resources and some help in actually putting that reuse principle to work in their home. So as I said, we know homeowners are going to want to leave their mark. They might want to redo the bathroom or finish the basement or redesign the porch. And there are ways that we can reduce material waste as much as possible and salvage as much existing material as we can. So when starting to renovate or rehab a house, hiring experts, reuse-minded contractors who share those same values is really important. First of all, we want to make sure that a contractor is doing what we want them to do. Are they totally renovating a space, meaning like throwing a bunch of the original material out and starting from scratch? Or are they restoring something? Are they trying to keep as much material intact as possible? Asking these questions up front of your potential contractors, make sure that you're on the same page, ensures that as much material is being captured and repurposed as possible. Ask about their experience with salvage, call their references, see some example projects that they've done. And for all of you real estate agents, building your own network of contractors with reuse expertise, with salvage expertise, this is an asset, a real service you can provide your potential clients. One type of project that would certainly require the use of a reuse-minded contractor is deconstruction. So to define the word to start, deconstruction is the careful dismantling of a structure or a part of a structure in order to preserve and reuse building materials. So bigger renovation projects, bigger changes to a home or building might generate enough material, quote unquote, waste that it's worth considering deconstruction. So as it says, deconstruction, we carefully remove materials inside a home, including fixtures, flooring, hardware, appliances, dimensional lumber, molding, all these things that you can otherwise imagine would end up piled in a dumpster and end up in the trash somehow. Deconstruction is often thought of in terms of a whole house project. So as an alternative to mechanical demolition of a whole house, the alternative being to, deconstruction. It's also a service that can be provided for part of a home, for a kitchen renovation, for a floor plan change or something like that. Deconstruction is an option that, again, reduces the waste that we generate, salvages quality materials, and allows them to be repurposed or reused somewhere else. So, and a question then of course becomes, what happens to those materials that we've salvaged, that we've deconstructed? In some cases, the material you salvaged or deconstructed could be put back to use in the same home, but for a different purpose. But in many cases, these materials will end up at a local reuse retailer. So places like the Restore or Better Futures warehouse. Better Futures, as I've listed here, is the largest, most prominent, I'd say, deconstruction contractor working in the state of Minnesota, and they operate an amazing reuse retail space right next to the Habitat Restore on Minnehaha. And all of the things that they've salvaged from their various projects, from private homes, residential homes, to commercial projects, end up there. So you'll find, like I said, appliances, flooring, all windows, doors, all sorts of stuff. I have a friend who works in the deconstruction world who uses the metaphor of an organ donor to talk about deconstruction. So imagining, a house or a room that has served its purpose, right? And things need to change. And so we can salvage the material from within it and put it to use, give new life to another building, another home, or another room. I have not updated this list since I have moved away from the Twin Cities. So if there are additional deconstruction contractors out there that I am not aware of, I hope Emily or someone else can chime in. So deconstruction is really, I think it's a traditional practice. It's not a new idea, but it's definitely becoming more and more common and relevant. As Emily mentioned, some municipalities are starting to mandate this practice in certain situations because we realize there's so much quality usable material that just goes away when we demolish a home. So I think it's an important thing we're going to see more of in the future. So Heneghan, Ramsey, and Washington counties have grant programs to support deconstruction for both residential and commercial projects. You see the amounts here. I have not listed all of the nitty-gritty details. There are some requirements, of course, for these grant programs, including minimum square footage or tonnage of material. But this is a really amazing option for homeowners to have some support with this type of work as it sits right now, with deconstruction being newer and demolition being preferred and faster. In many cases, deconstruction is more expensive. So having a little bit of this financial support can really sort of change the game for folks considering deconstruction. I see a few chats, so I want to be sure. Oh, thank you for adding the links. I appreciate that, Emily. I just wanted to be sure I wasn't missing any questions. And I have, and I wanted to point out too, so in a recent, or not so recent anymore, sort of a second wave of Hennepin County's building reuse grant program, they added this $15,000 for a structural move and $5,000 for using reused building material in existing projects. So these are newer additions after sort of assessing how their original grants functioned and what their constituents might also be interested in. So a lot of support coming from the county level for building material reuse. These are the flyers for said programs, which are available on those websites that Emily just linked to. Okay, so I've covered a couple of the aspects of reuse in homeownership that would probably involve hiring a contractor. But another great way to make sure that a rehab project doesn't create unnecessary waste is to do it yourself. And for some homeowners, of course, this comes more easily than others. And we're grateful, though, in this modern era that we have a wide variety of resources available to us at our fingertips. Of course, on the internet, every Joe Schmo with a table saw can create a YouTube channel about home maintenance and repair. So like any internet research, I say cross-reference and check your sources. But here are my 5 favorite online resources for DIY home repair and renovation that I have no qualms over sharing with you. So and if you are, I know I can see many of the folks in this call are Old Home Certified, and there's a whole hour in the Old Home Certified course about resources for, living in an older home. And I talk about all of these resources. We talk about all of these resources in that class as well. So the Craftsman blog, just like it sounds, a blog by a craftsman, gets really into, particularly old historic house stuff, lots of wood window information, expertise there. This old house, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize this until I bought a house and really started taking advantage of all of the resources available on their website. It is a gigantic encyclopedia, and it's not contrary to its name, specific to older homes. This old house has step-by-step instructions for, replacing your toilet or installing a fan in your bedroom that is not necessarily specific to a particular era of home, but really breaks down by difficulty level, names all of the materials and tools that you'll need, estimates the amount of time, which is usually aspirational, but helpful nonetheless. So I really appreciate this old house. Brick and Beam Detroit and Preservation Resource Center of New Orleans are both operated by nonprofit organizations in those 2 respective cities. And so some of their resources are geographically specific, but most are not. And again, offer a wide range of how-to guides, step-by-step instructions, videos, and link to other external sources as well. Of course, I have to promote Rethos' rehab resources page. So within our rehab resources page, we link to all of these other places, offer information about local contractors, energy efficiency resources. We talk about the deconstruction grants that are available in Hennepin and Ramsey counties. So tons of great information out there for you and your clients to take advantage of. Of course, learning in person could not possibly be replaced, I don't think. So there are local workshops all around the Twin Cities that offer hands-on learning that, really foreground reuse and repair. Minnesota Tool Library is an excellent source for learning. Rethos, of course, but you already knew that. And Minneapolis and St. Paul Community Ed, too, often have classes related to home maintenance, some smaller repair projects, those sorts of things. So there's lots of information out there. I also always encourage folks to, talk to your neighbors. And you think about some of our neighborhoods in the Twin Cities, you look at homes, to the east and the west of you, and they're probably a similar style home with similar issues that you might be facing or similar projects they're undertaking. So connect with your neighbors. Not everybody needs to have the same 15 tools gathering dust in their garage. Go ask to borrow their tools, ask how they might have approached this project, especially if there are older folks in your neighborhood who've been, lived there for 30 years. They've probably gone through quite a few rounds of home repair and renovation and have some expertise to share. So we talked about making some changes, right, to our spaces, and these might require the purchase of materials to add to your space, or they might be generating materials that are, still have life in them and need a place to go. So in the Twin Cities, there is no shortage of building material and salvage stores. Some are more focused on architectural antiques type store. So, you know, really amazing sort of period pieces and treasures to find there. Other places like Better Futures or the Restore have a wide range of, you know, functional materials and items from all eras of homes and home building. This is a non-exhaustive list. I encourage you to do your own exploring, honestly, taking a day and just going to a few of these spots and seeing what you find, and even just seeing, you know, what types of items they have in stock is a great way, again, to sort of add that tool to your toolbox as a realtor to share with your clients about some of these local businesses we have in the area. These are images from Architectural Antiques. They actually have a really great website that showcases some of the stuff they have. I mean, just look at this center picture. I mean, oh my God, walking through there is just kind of awe-inspiring. So pretty cool stuff. And as I mentioned, you know, places like the Restore, and this is Bauer Brothers on the right, an entire floor of windows. I am not kidding. So, you know, with a lot of our older homes in the cities, we've got pretty standard sizes for windows, doors. If your client has a window that, you know, maybe the rotted sill or it's something happened to it that it's beyond repair, I guarantee you there's a matching one on this floor of Bauer Brothers. So seeking out, you know, a matching window that matches the type of wood, the era, the style of the home is entirely possible with these local salvage and reuse retailers in our community. I'm sitting in the Restore at Habitat La Crosse here right now, and on the floor we have, you know, appliances, we have like sinks and vanities, we have flooring of all different types, tile, and we have tools and hardware and things. I mean, stuff that people don't even realize we have available to us that are in perfectly good shape, working order, quality materials. I really just encourage people to come to these types of places before heading to the big box stores, just seeing what the options are and seeing if you can work with some of these reused materials. And again, not buying something brand new. Okay, so I want to tie all of this together with a story. So these images are from a house, a neighbor friend of mine actually here in La Crosse. And I mean, this is kind of funny, actually. When I was putting together this class, I was already friends with this person and knew this story that I'm about to share. But it was prior to me moving to La Crosse and prior to me working at Habitat for Humanity, which plays a role in this story. So I think I manifested something by adding these photos to this class like 2 years ago. Anyway, so my pals, Mackenzie and Dave, have a really cool 1920s 4-square home here in La Crosse. And this was their kitchen on the left when they moved in. So they were interested in redesigning the kitchen and wanted to get rid of these cabinets, the flooring, the appliances, none of which were totally original to the house. You know, it just wasn't their style anymore. So what they did is they called up Habitat here in La Crosse, which has a really cool program called Reclaim. And with Reclaim, and I have to add a caveat, this is specific to La Crosse. Habitat Twin Cities does not have this program yet, but you know, maybe in the future. But Twin Cities has other salvage services. So this is what we have here in La Crosse. Habitat will come into residential homes or businesses that are about to go through a major renovation like this one and salvage usable materials. So you can see we loaded up our trailer with these old cabinets, we took the appliances, we took the light fixtures, anything that would be able to, you know, be sold on the floor of the Restore. So, you know, we sell these items at a Restore, and of course, all of the proceeds from Habitat Restores go back into doing the good work of Habitat, which is providing and rehabbing affordable homes in our community. So Habitat took all of that material out, and, you know, of course, it takes away the excitement and drama of demo day that we've all seen on HGTV, where people go crazy with sledgehammers, but a much nicer result, I think. So then, not to be outdone, these homeowners salvaged wood flooring from a local rubber mill in town, high quality, perfectly fine wood floors from this vacant building, installed them in their home, in this kitchen and their back room here. And here's, you know, an important piece of this too. they hired a contractor who was comfortable with salvage, who knew what to do with older flooring, who was familiar with older homes. They worked with somebody who they could trust and had, you know, some experience with doing this kind of work. So this is a really important piece of this puzzle too, as I mentioned, is hiring those contractors who you can who share that value of reuse and older building material. So sanded, refinished these gorgeous floors. And here's the finished product. So, I mean, brand new, you know, kitchen, you know, up here, but they were able to salvage and reduce the amount of waste generated from the project, able to salvage that floor and put reused materials in there as much as they could. So it turned out really, really beautifully and with always with reuse sort of at the front of their minds. So we've talked about repair and rehab and furnishing our homes. I wanted to talk a bit about that sort of long-term maintenance because this is a huge part of home ownership. Another plug for the Minnesota Tool Library. I'm not sure if any of you here are members, have been to the tool libraries before, but it's an amazing resource in the Twin Cities that, you know, I really think like a membership to the tool library is such a cool welcome home gift for some, you know, of your clients. With the membership to the tool library, folks can borrow power tools, hand tools, lawn care equipment. They can get access to their workshop space where they can use some of their heavier equipment and work on projects. There are classes at the tool library, and there are 2 locations, one in Northeast Minneapolis in the Thorpe building, and then the St. Paul one, I think recently relocated to like the big intersection of Dale, Como, and Front Street. So just a really amazing resource for, again, you know, finding, loaning out to borrowing tools that you don't need to purchase brand new and keeping up with ongoing repairs. Seasonal maintenance is a huge thing we, you know, try to plug to all homeowners. We have this awesome resource on the Rethos Rehab Resources page called Drafting a Maintenance Plan that was put together by another Rethos instructor. Really, you know, trying to emphasize the fact that small, consistent, seasonal maintenance over time reduces the likelihood of having, you know, big, costly, likely pretty wasteful repair projects. You know, cleaning out your gutters twice a year reduces the likelihood of major clogs, which lead to major leaks, which lead to major damage. So encouraging those sort of small, consistent steps is a huge part of reducing our waste and you know, saving some money too over the course of many, many years. And Emily is going to pop back in here and talk about fix-it clinics in the community.
Yeah. I'm curious how many of you have been to a fix-it clinic. If you want to comment, you're more than welcome to. And if you did go, what did you get fixed? So a fix-it clinic is an event where you can take any item in your home that's basically small enough for one person to carry. So unfortunately, not like your washer and your dryer, but maybe a lamp or a toaster or a sewing machine or a vacuum cleaner. Take those items to a volunteer staffed, if you will, event where folks will help you do what they can to open it up, see what's broken, see what's out of alignment, and see if they can help you get it fixed. So for example, at a recent clinic I went to for Hennepin County, I had a electric tea kettle that I had for 5 years, and it was getting power and wasn't heating. So I brought it in because I thought, I'm not going to replace this. I'm not going to buy a new one. I love this thing. And it ended up just being a fuse that had blown, which you think about both the money and the materials, how often those things are just thrown away when literally it was probably about a 50-cent fuse piece. And the person who helped was very familiar with this as being an issue, popped that right out, put in a new one, all set. 5 of the metro counties, as well as the Minnesota Tool Library, offer these free events. If you go to our website, and I'll pop it in the chat here in just a minute, is if you go to our events page, we have all of these together. You can go to each individual county website, but our website, because these counties are all of our members, we have them on our events page. So if you're curious and you live in Hennepin County and you can't go to the one on the second Saturday, which is this coming Saturday, and you always have a standing thing Saturdays, and you want to check one out, say Anoka County might not be too far, so you could go ahead and go to one of those. You don't have to live in the county where you go. So these are great resources. We were just at the Minneapolis Home and Garden Show and talked to a lot of folks, including many new homeowners who were super excited, because I'm sure you all know the last thing that new homeowners have is lots of extra disposable cash. So fixing the stuff that they have, getting some assistance on keeping those things in gear is a really great way, a simple way to just provide that to your new homeowners to get those things fixed and keep them in use. A few other things too for furniture repair. There are a lot more options for wood. And in fact, if it's a small thing that maybe needs some just minor things, they could potentially bring those to a fix-it clinic. Upholstery can be a lot harder. However, there's actually a Professional Upholsterers Association Minnesota that's got a list of all the folks who are part of that. So if you've got somebody who has a couch that they really love and it just, maybe looks a little sad for the kitchen refresh or the living room refresh they want to do, maybe suggest, if it's got good structure, suggest that they consider reupholstery. They can get a lot of fun looking patterns and really update it. There's a gal I follow on Facebook that's up in the Northeast Metro. Her business is called A Chick and a Chair, and man, she has some really fun redos. And so if you're interested in that kind of thing, you can follow her work. But there's really some great ways to do a refresh without throwing away the bulk of that material. The next thing we'll want to talk about is cleaning out homes. As many of you probably run into, when you're on the selling side, sometimes there's just folks who have accumulated a lot of stuff. And I know there are probably some of you who have been stuck with dealing with that stuff or helping your clients figure out how on earth to deal with that stuff. The unfortunate thing about many cleanouts is that they're often done in haste. If any of you are like me, you wait until the last minute for many things. And because of that, they generate a lot of waste, and they can also generate a lot of anxiety. So there are some planning resources if you can help as you're working with a buyer to help them be planful about, do you have a plan for how you're going to pack up the stuff that you want, how you're going to deal with the stuff that you don't. Hennepin County actually has a donation opportunity guide specifically geared toward move outs. And so you can check out, checking that. They have one for apartment dwellers too, which is kind of a nice resource for folks if they're moving out of an apartment and into a home. So if you're working with a buyer, that they can think intentionally about that. There are other organizations that we can definitely connect you with depending on the resource that, or the region, depending on where somebody is that we can help you connect with. So something just to kind of think about, and on the next page, we've got some more resources as well, help people plan for that. So then there's not a lot of waste. Actually, that must be the last slide, but that's okay. We can talk about it in a minute. On the flip side is when you're helping if a client who's buying and they want to furnish a home. And the biggest thing with reuse is that there's a really important part about closing the loop and making sure that we're not just donating things, but we're also purchasing those used items. So there's actually a demand for that. You can help clients envision spaces with unique, fun used pieces, whether that's furniture or artwork. It's usually at a cost savings. The picture you see here is from the Habitat Restore in New Brighton. A lot of those couches are between $45 and $75. So especially if you've got a new homeowner that say wants to spend some money on a new couch for their main living room, but they've got a basement and they're just like, a new set is anywhere from $500 to $1,500, maybe even more. So if you say, well, check out the Restore, that might be a way that you could, for now, have a good space. Maybe it's like a kiddo kind of TV cave where they want to just have some comfy stuff, but it doesn't need to be super fancy. That's a really great resource. The other thing I want to just mention that's not on here, but it's becoming, it's growing more and more, and that is Buy Nothing. This is a really great thing to mention to your clients when they move to a new community, like, hey, look on Facebook. There is also an app, but look on Facebook and see if you can't find your local Buy Nothing group, because that's a great place to say, hey, I just moved in. I'm looking for some rugs for this space, or I'm looking for a table that'll fit in my living room. And that's a great free resource. And I'll drop a link in just a short bit on that. All right. Oh yes, I forgot I had put it on this. There it is right there. I put the link there. So it's community-based gift giving for local on Facebook or the app. Some other resources, Bridging. So if you have somebody who's getting rid of things, this is a nonprofit that helps folks who are coming out of shelters or homeless situations where they need furniture, beds. They take linens as well as kitchen items as well. So they're a really great resource. They do pickups, they charge for those, but they do offer pickups too. So if you've got somebody who's getting ready to move and they can fill, a whole space, a garage, they don't come into the home, but I think will take things out of the garage. Habitat for Humanity also offers pickups. They will not go into your home for sure, but I know they take things from the other side of the house or the garage. Empty the Nest is a resource. They do pack and move services, and then they have a thrift store where they sell that stuff. They recycle the things that have to be recycled. Lake Country Books is one I put in here because they had specifically reached out that they offer haul-away services for books. They don't take certain things and they have to be free of water damage, but that could be one if you've got somebody who's got a really large library collection. It's maybe not super common, but if you know somebody who is moving and they've got a lot of books, that's a potential resource. Mano a Mano is one I've added for this class because I realized how many folks were bringing up medical equipment, especially if they're helping like an older family member who is maybe moving into a condo or assisted living, and they've got things like, a whole bunch of equipment, or maybe somebody has passed away and they've got a wheelchair or crutches. Mano a Mano works to collect medical supplies for clinics in Bolivia. They're based in St. Paul, but their owner or the founder is from Bolivia. And so that's a really great resource because they take a lot of stuff that other organizations don't take. And then the Minnesota Materials Exchange, if any of you work with commercial properties, this can be a really great resource for businesses that need to get rid of things, whether that's office supplies or like widgets and gadgets. And I was looking the other day, there was a fridge posted, there was a motor post, like an engine kind of thing. So all sorts of things. So if any of you work on the commercial side, I know we've mostly been focused on residential, but that can be a really great resource there. Or if you yourself are looking to help get rid of some things, it's a little bit different than like a Facebook marketplace because it really is geared toward businesses. And yeah, thank you for mentioning the Women's Prison Book Project. They will take stuff. The biggest thing to remember with them for books is, unfortunately, the majority of time they can't take hardcover books because of the restrictions on the prison side where they disallow hardcover books for many of the states, and systems do not allow hardcover books. So that can be challenging. And they really have to, a lot of them are super strict. The books have to look next to new in order for them to be able to accept them. They do have other resources to then redonate them, but just to be aware with their project is that it's a fairly narrow set of books that they can take. All right, we have about 7 minutes left. I would invite you to add questions to the chat or come on video if you want to ask a verbal chat, but hopefully you've learned some things, you found some resources in this workshop. We really want to be an ongoing resource as well. I would imagine that Natalie in her new role would be willing to do that as well, especially if you're outside the metro and are looking for greater Minnesota resources. A lot of this admittedly is fairly metro-centric, but there are other entities around the state that provide similar resources. So if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
Looks like there's a question in the chat. I can read it out. It's from Margot Ashmore. Could you talk about the potential tax benefit that offsets the cost of deconstruction?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you work with a nonprofit to either donate the materials or to do the deconstruction, and you donate those materials to a place like Habitat Restore, Better Futures, though that can have a tax benefit. Because you're donating just like you would if you're making another donation. So that is definitely one of the ways to offset that cost. It of course doesn't speed up the process, but it helps with the financial side. And Hennepin County used to have a thing specifically with Better Futures. I'm not 100% sure if their grant program has kind of replaced that or not, but there are definitely some tax benefits for that if you're working with a nonprofit. If you work with a for-profit contractor, unless they're donating those materials to a nonprofit, there wouldn't be the tax benefit, but definitely a question to ask depending on who you're working with. So Scott, good question. We have these currently on our website. I can share the link here in just a second for the created like a little flyer. I believe, Samantha, maybe you can say for sure that this will also get the slideshow. We can send out a PDF of that to everybody who attended.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be sending a follow-up email with all the links and the handout.
So here's the link right now of the handout to a number of them. We're going to make an update on this because not all the county fix-it clinics are on there. Since we made this, Carver County got back into doing theirs, and I don't know if we forgot an Oak County or if they just restarted, but and then there's a couple other things we'll add, but that at least gets you started. And then Rochelle, I have a client to deconstruct home for demo. Are those products used? I would assume so. I am not super familiar with a program specifically using folks that are currently incarcerated. I know that Better Futures works with folks who have come out of the incarceration system and are working with helping them get reestablished in green jobs and really helping them find meaningful employment. But I would imagine if they're deconstructing that, I mean, that's the whole intent, is that you are intentionally trying to save those products to be, you know, resold for use either in, you know, furnishing new homes or fixing new homes or other projects, other uses. Any other questions? Well, thanks everybody. As I mentioned, we are recording this one again today. We have the other one up on our website already, or the previous one we had done. I will add up, we'll add this new recording just since we had a few new resources to our YouTube channel to share that. And maybe I can include that. But if you have folks who are interested in this and they didn't get to take this one to get the credit, you know, it's still useful information. You can pass that on, and I'm sure we'll offer it again in the fall. So if somebody does want to attend, take the class and get that credit, please do have them join the Rethos updates or follow the events page on their website. Margot said some of the deconstruction for recycling about 50% and max can be reused, the rest. That's, yeah, so it sort of depends on the project, Margot. That's very true that a good portion can be, it sort of depends on how you do the math. Concrete changes. So if you look at the foundation, that changes the math really quick, because obviously concrete is not being reused unless they're doing it as backfill on a site or some sort of thing. Usually the concrete is getting recycled though, which is super important because concrete is super environmentally intense with the materials it takes and emissions that are created. And so, but yeah, a lot of it, and it sort of depends on the age of the home. Obviously, older homes that have old growth wood in them are going to have better reuse for the lumber. Unfortunately, there are periods of time when a lot of stuff, and even now, is getting glued together, and glues are much harder than screws, is what you say. So it's much easier when, if somebody can use screws to do a project, take that apart later, or even nails, they can denail things. But even when it is just the 15%, and that's improving all the time, there's entities that are working on taking that lumber and making new laminated products that can be repurposed for other things. So it's definitely changing and improving all the time.
And a point I'd make on that too is, you know, there's an economic benefit to deconstruction in the sense that all of these reuse processes require labor to do them, and the job creation potential of deconstruction versus mechanical demolition that can happen in 1 or 2 days and everything just gets transported off site is really quite powerful. And that has been I think a leading motivator for some municipalities we see around the country who are starting to mandate deconstruction is the job creation potential, economy potential really for the local businesses.
And there are definitely environmental concerns as well, and the need for deconstruction, especially if you have a house that has lead at all. One of the big reasons that Portland adopted their deconstruction ordinance is because of the air pollution that's created when you take a house down through demolition, and the lead dust that goes into the air and the equity issues that that has caused. And so when you do deconstruction, obviously houses are abated first, but even then, like when you do deconstruction, you're able to avoid a lot of that dust creation and the impact that has. So there are other benefits as well, beyond just the very easily identifiable ones in terms of money, that the deconstruction offers. So. Great. Well,
All right. Well, if there are no more questions, go ahead.
No, that's it. Yep. I think we're.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you so much for showing up, everybody. I'll be reaching out shortly with some follow-up emails and the links mentioned on this class today. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Bye.